All right, so I'm going to keep this short, and I'm not going to put a lot of video in it or anything. It's going to be just me as a talking head for a couple of minutes. I am a long time. I'm talking since before Gundam Wing was on Toonami, so 1990s in the US, which is saying something because it was very hard to find Gundam stuff in the United States before Gundam Wing came along. I love the One Year War. I love the Universal Century stuff. Xeon and the Federation, all that, that's my jam. Also a Battletech guy, as you can see, if you know those, but I really got into the mecha real robot stuff with Mobile Suit Gundam. So I watched Requiem for Vengeance. I have a couple of critiques for it, and they're more critiques of what's been going on with the Gundam IP recently than they are the actual show. I will say, before I get into anything else, if you are not familiar with Gundam and the One Year War and want something quick and easy to get into to see if it's something that interests you, it is only 6 episodes on Netflix. They're all about a half hour, so you're looking at only about a 3 hour commitment. Even the 08MS team, which is one of my favorites, is a much greater commitment of time and attention than this is. It is a great little self-contained story. Does a great job introducing, if you aren't real familiar with it, without getting way too deep into the lore and overwhelming you. But I do have some issues with it. And I don't have video because I have a absolutely ancient laptop and computer. Could not handle running it on Netflix, recording it and editing it and everything else. It would destroy my processor, so I'm not going to bother. I will be putting up some photos to show what I'm talking about, though. I will try to also do this as a good followed by a bad, so it's not just whining. Good. I am very happy to see that while we have yet another little bit of the One Year War we've not heard about before, it's set in some place in not only this universe, but any of them, including Battletech, where when things happen in Europe or Eastern Europe, we very rarely see what's going on in places like Romania, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, things like that. It's always Germany, Poland, Russia, Ukraine, things like that. The companies or countries most Americans can find on a map. This one, with the exception of the very end, when they go to Odessa to try to get off planet, takes place almost entirely in Romania, which, as you can probably tell by the flag behind me, makes me a very happy boy. It starts out with them attacking Federation base in Cluj-Napoca, and then moves through the Carpathians, works its way toward Ukraine, and finally toward the Black Sea to Odessa at the very end of it. That I'm very happy to see. Just a quick mention to, quick aside, I forgot to put in the original video and had to come back and redo this a little bit. There's a neat little thing in the first episode, right after they take the base in Cluj-Napoca and before the shit hits the fan and everything goes bad. The soldiers that are sitting around are talking about local rumors because they're all from the space colonies. They're not local, they're invaders. They're talking about local rumors and stories that they've heard. That the forest all around them is haunted. That shepherds and local children and all these other things have disappeared in the forest, and that the people have seen demons and all these other things. They're actually referring to a real place. As I said, they've just taken the military base at Cluj-Napoca, which right outside of it is the Hoyabachu Forest, which is a real haunted, supposedly haunted, demon-infested forest in the Carpathians in Romania, where people have gone missing. Things have happened. Ghost hunter shows have been there and gotten all kinds of weird stuff. If you want to just a quick 1 hour thing to see about it, look for the episode of Expedition X where they send the crew there. I'm not a big believer in this stuff. I like folklore. I do believe in some weird things, that there's stuff out there we don't understand. Some of the stories that go with this are a little too much for me, but it is very interesting, some of the stuff that ghost hunters and supernatural shows that have gone there have caught. So I just wanted to mention that. It's a neat little thing that if you don't know what they're talking about, it'll go right over your head and you'll just think it's soldiers sitting around BS and trying to scare the new guy. They're actually talking about a real thing. So somebody at Netflix or Bandai or Sunrise or whatever did their homework a little bit on the local area. Kudos to that. Good job. Now back to the regularly scheduled video. It's nice to see something other than the main storylines that we always see. It's not another thing off in space somewhere where we don't know where anything is. It's just in space. It's an actual recognizable place in the world. It's nice to see. I'm happy for it. Same with 08 MS team. I like seeing Southeast Asia. That was nice. It's not the same thing we always see. The criticism I have with that, though, is we have yet another, and I understand this was a giant war, but we have yet another mobile suit team with distinct pilots, distinct paint jobs, customized everything else that we've never heard of before this, which I'm kind of okay with that, but at the same time, does everything have to be a unique elite ace thing? One of the things people liked about the 08 MS team was, other than the fact that the protagonists were piloting ground type Gundams, it was just grunts. They were nobodies. What they did, other than a little bit of what they got into in the story, didn't really impact the war any, this can be said the same thing. But they weren't an elite established team of aces that everybody heard of, aside from the people watching it. So, little criticism there. Not a huge one, but a little bit of a criticism. You see a lot of that in the Gundam stuff recently. It's what it is. I like that it's not, with the exception of the dislike that's going to follow this, I like that it's not all unique, brand new mobile suits that we've never heard of before being piloted by Xeon. It's not like 0080 War in the Pocket, where we have all of a sudden the camphor showing up and a new design of the Zaku we've never seen before. It's Zaku's. They're basically, they look weird, which is kind of a criticism put in with that. I don't like the way the Zaku 2s look in this. The Goof and the Zaku 1 look great. The gun cannon that's in it gun tank looks great. The Zaku 2s, I can't get over the fact that, to me, they look like a model built out of Connects, not a Zaku 2. The proportions just aren't right. Something in them just does not say Zaku 2 to me. Couldn't even tell you what it is. And now I can specifically say they got this wrong. It's just overall, it's almost like an uncanny valley thing. Or as I said in a Facebook post where we were talking about it, it looks like it tried to dress up as a Zaku 2 but had to buy the costume at Spirit Halloween. Not quite right, just slightly off brand. The criticism with that, I love that we're seeing Zaku's. I love that it's not elite pilot or elite ace suits being used by these pilots. And then in the very first episode, a Gundam shows up. Yet another prototype, one-off Gundam in the 1 Year War that we've never seen or heard of, that the design of it doesn't even look like stuff from the 1 Year War. This thing looks like something that would show up in Unicorn or Zeta or Double Zeta Gundam. This does not look like a 1 Year War Gundam. It looks like they took some aspects they liked from some of the HGUC Gunpla kits, like an over-the-shoulder Gatling cannon and a rack that comes up over the back with like 5 beam sabers in it, where, normally they're in the leg or they're on the hip or something. They're easily accessible. It's not the cinematic, up comes the thing, grabs it, and there's the lightsaber. It almost looks too Star Wars-y cinematic. We do not need a new, unique Gundam in every single new part of the IP that comes out. I get that the franchise is called Mobile Suit Gundam, but the first 2 words of that are mobile suit. The third word of it is Gundam, because that was what the original series was. You do not have to have a new, unique Gundam in every single project that comes out. And I will say I have talked to quite a few people online. I'm making this. It premiered today. It's been on Netflix for less than 24 hours. I have already talked to quite a few people who agree with me on that. Not that it's universal. Not that, my old grognard is, the end all be all. But I've talked to already quite a few people that agree with me on that. We're getting a little tired of seeing a brand new Gundam every single time the IP comes out with something new. Just like the same thing with, for a while, the 90s and early 2000s when new One Year War stuff was being added, which is great because it was a massive war. There are still so many stories that can be told in it. But we don't need every single time, which we don't thankfully in this one, have to see a new or not Zaku, but a new Xeon mobile suit that looks related to the mobile suits we've already seen, yet for some reason has a German name and all these new weapons that we've never seen used on a mobile suit before, and we never really see used again. So if it was come up with and it's so great in this series, why was it never used again? Like, stick with what you've already made. You know what I mean? New things that are set further back into the IP than where the story has gone should fit in with where they're set. They should not look like an in-universe fan fiction that is set within it. It should not look like some war movie somebody 20, 30 years after the war that's being shown came up with. It should look like something that is set within the established. So, after that, positive. I am very happy that we have human, likable, killable, hurtable characters in this. They're not super people. They're men and women. They're not superheroes. They don't really have plot armor. I mean, there's a little bit of it there. But it's not like you see in a lot of the other mecha shows where, the hero pilot can do no wrong and takes out legions of the enemy. That's not what you see in this. You see a little bit at the start when they're fighting something other than mobile suits that looks like that might be kind of where they're going with it, because they come in and mop the floor with the opposition to show how badass Zaku's are. And then very quickly get their asses handed to them by something much better than a Zaku. And at the same time with the character thing, I will not spoil it if you haven't seen it. And if you have not seen the 08th MS team, you will not recognize this cameo that's in it. But there is a character that we have not seen since the 90s, who was a very quick one-off character in another pre-existing part of the IP, that makes a very sudden and unexpected return in this, which is in character, continues with how he was established in the other show, fits in time and location-wise, and actually serves the plot. It's not fan service. It's almost like we need somebody to introduce this portion of the plot. Hey, I know. How about if we bring back this character that was semi-popular just for a cameo? We don't make a big deal about it. He's not really seen again, but at the same time, it's not obtrusive that he's in there. I'm very happy they did that. I very much liked that. Kudos to Netflix and the people from Gundam for doing that. If you have seen it, know who I'm talking about, may or may not agree with me. If you have not seen it or have seen it without seeing the 08th MS team, don't understand the reference, I'm going to put a picture of the character up and that's all I'm going to say. Glad to see him back. Actually, kind of wish he'd gotten a little bit more, but the little bit we got of him was great. The criticism to go with that, and this is going to be the final one I have for this, is you have a character who is very obvious to those of us watching it that are familiar with the IP, that this character is, right from the first episode, meant to be a Newtype. Now, Newtypes are a weird thing in Gundam. It's never really established what they really are, what they can really do. Every different take on them throughout the IP has its own unique view and spin of what a Newtype is. This one is not bad. I don't have a criticism of the Newtype. But my criticism I do have is the other Newtype. Now, the Xeon character, who is set up and very clearly meant to be a Newtype, is pointed out to her in the show that she is a Newtype. She basically dismisses the idea of there being such a thing as a new type. They're brand new at this. I'm not going to get into the lore. You can look it up online if you don't know what I'm talking about. Trust me, it's a rabbit hole, a very deep, twisting rabbit hole. But at this point of the story, they're a theory. They're not really a thing, with a few exceptions. The exceptions being the Gundam pilots. Yet again, we not only have a new weird Gundam, as I mentioned, that doesn't even really fit with the aesthetic of the time, or, and people will argue with me over this, and they do make a good point, but from my perspective, my view of this, does not fit in with the established lore. You can disagree with me on that, and you probably can make some good points. I am not disagreeing with your points. I'm just saying my headcanon of the 1 Year War, Mobile Suit Gundam, all of these one-off prototype Gundams do not fit in. And I can explain it in comments. If somebody doesn't agree with me, wants to argue with me, I will. If you actually want to have a discussion, I'll explain what I mean. Let me know down below. But the Gundam pilot is yet another teenage child soldier, Newtype, piloting a Gundam to defeat the evil Zeon who invaded their planet. Because, God, that's been such a crowd pleaser the first 50 frickin' times we've seen it. For the love of God, if you're going to give us a Gundam and expect us to accept it, stop putting these extremely rare, supposedly barely even existing, newly emerging branches of human evolution into the pilot seats of them with no explanation or acknowledgement. As I said, these things are supposed to be just emerging in human evolution. Basically, not the same thing, but if you want to look at it as being as weird as it is in its setting, think Psychers from Warhammer 40k. They're a big deal. And yet, every time we get a new thing, the Federation apparently put out a classified ad seeking underaged teenage Newtype with tragic backstory to pilot extremely overpowered prototype mobile suit to combat invading forces. Applied number given. And within a week, they get a dozen of them that they put into these prototype suits, send them off to do their thing. And yeah, we do not need another one of this. It could have been an unnamed pilot that we never saw. I was perfectly fine with that up until the point where all of a sudden I was like, oh, that's who that kid is, the mobile suits pilot. Great. Okay. Yeah. If you're gonna show it, it's been established in the lore even that the early mobile suit pilots, the prototype test pilots, aside from Amuro Ray, a lot of them were former fighter pilots. They don't all have to be kids. They don't have to keep going back to the well of child soldier forced to fight in a compressed analog of World War II with giant stompy robots. They can be grown men and women. The people they're fighting are grown men and women. Why does the Gundam pilot always have to be a kid with superpowers? It is so old. Give it a rest. Having said all of that, and I've tried to, now that obviously they're not there when I'm recording this, I'm trying to think to put some pictures from the show up in the corner here. As I said, don't like the Zaku design. Love the Goof and the Zaku 1 and the gun tank. Do not like there being another brand new Gundam in this. Am happy to see the gym show up and actually be an important plot point, as it should be at this point. However, you could have had a more advanced prototype or upgrade of the gym in place of the Gundam. Because, as established in the show, little bit of a spoiler, as established in the show, they are not far away from the production line where the gyms are being turned out. by the dozens and hundreds, as they basically say in the show, turning the tide of the war. It would make perfect sense that one of the prototypes or an upgrade version of it that they're field testing could be what they run into. It did not have to be another Super Gundam. Anyway, I enjoyed it. I very much enjoyed it. I may not watch it again because, as I said, it's only about 3 hours. It's very digestible. It's not one of those things that you watch, give it a couple of days, and go back through again to see what you may have missed. It's really not a lot of it in there. But I can highly recommend, if you're somebody looking for something simple to get into the Mobile Suit Gundam franchise, the 1 Year War, which is the big thing in the Universal Century. Definitely give it a look. Give it a try. Some mature themes, a lot of death, a lot of wounding, a lot of destruction. However, honestly, the world we live in now, if you've watched the news, probably no worse than you see in the 6 o'clock evening news or browsing the internet to see what's going on in, say, Ukraine. It's the world we live in, unfortunately. But give it a watch. You might be pleasantly surprised. Is it groundbreaking? No. Is it awful? Also, no. It's very middle of the road, but in a good way. It doesn't throw too much at you, but it has enough respect for you as the audience, as the consumer of the media, to put some things together yourself, understand what's going on, and in this world we live in of smartphones and everything else, they know that if you're just coming into this, they don't need to explain everything with an exposition dump. If you don't know what you're looking at, you have a Googleator right there in your hand. You can call it up and look. They can just move the plot along. If this was done like the Gundam series of the 90s and 2000s were, we'd probably be looking at a 12-hour OVA spread across, for the time period, 4 or 6 DVDs. What we got is 6 relatively contained episodes, none of them totaling more than 40 minutes of content. Definitely give it a watch. You'll probably like it. Even if you're not into Gundam, just like mecha, stompy robots, or a different take of a war movie type thing, give it a look. You might enjoy it. And if you don't, if you're somebody like me who's coming from a long history in this franchise, this IP, you probably won't like it for the same reasons I've already said. But take it or leave it. I definitely recommend it. I would say 3 out of 5 stars, but definitely worth at least one watch. If you've got Netflix, you can give it a shot. Give it a go. I give it a thumbs up. So, thanks for watching. This is a little different from what I normally post, but just got done watching it. Had some thoughts, some things to say. Figured I'd say them and share them with the probably 3 people that'll see this video. Have a good one, and we'll talk to you later. See you on my next video.